everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your host for today's presentation, and we're going to be looking at this interesting topic, and this is Congress and their fiscal responsibility update. What has Congress done to make the country more fiscally responsible, realizing we have a $35 trillion debt? With me, David Walker isn't here yet, but we do have Rick Rosner from the West Coast. And I noticed in the last show, Rick, they were kind of like talking and not letting you say anything.
No, it was like pro wrestling or rugby or something. It was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was really weird. But good news is they're over there and we're over here. So
I have a question for you. I'm going to be in trouble with my wife if I don't get an answer for this.
Okay.
So I'm 64. My wife is about to be 60. And she's like, right, when should we start taking Social Security? I'm like, if we have reasonable life expectancies, we should wait until we're 70 because it goes up by like, what, 8% a year, your monthly payout. But then she says, yeah, but will the money even be there when you're 70, when I'm 70? I'm like, oh, well, now that's something I have to ask Nick and David.
Whoa. Social Security. Okay. It's a good question. We can discuss Social Security. It's interesting. The question is, when should you take it out? Obviously, 62 is not good because they actually penalize you until you reach normal retirement age of 66 and 2/3 or something like that. Then you should take it out. But you do have an increase, which is significant if you wait and delay till you're age 70. But now you're creating a gamble. And the gamble is, are you going to live long enough because you have to look at how long did your parents live. It's a tough decision because you're rolling the dice afterwards. So
the break even, we did the break even. Yeah. And the difference between 65 and 70 is you break even if you make it to, like, for us at least, 81 for her, 82 for me.
Yeah. Okay.
But then there's the additional risk that the government cuts it.
Exactly. Okay. Now you have to add the additional risk, which you just described, is that the government can reduce it because by next decade, they're going to be forced to reduce everybody's Social Security by 20%. We're going to switch over to David Walker because Rick brought a very interesting discussion relating to Social Security, speaking about when you should take it. In other words, and my wife and I had to go through the same math problem. In other words, if you take it early, well, if you delay till age 70, you get a bigger benefit. Okay, so you got to add into the factor, well, if you live a long time, it's better to delay. But if you don't, it's not. But now we have another factor, David, that financial planners don't address, but needs to be addressed. Social Security runs out of money, and all of a sudden they here's what I'm looking, they're going to look to the federal government to pay for it. The federal government says, we don't have any money. And then they're inclined to reduce benefits or not allow increases, or something has got to happen. In other words, something's got to change. So it becomes a very difficult decision. I elected to take it at 66 and 2/3 because my dad didn't live till age 73, although my two uncles lived to age 94. So it's kind of if I live to 94, it's better to delay. But since I couldn't make that, and I don't like paying taxes on Social Security, and that's another thing that you're looking at right now. I got to pay taxes on 85% of our Social Security income. So there's the tax aspect. So I thought I'd be better off not to take it. But then you have to add the factor in, hey, is this thing really going to be around? I mean, this is a household discussion that goes on all the time, David. In other words, so is Social Security going to be around in the same format that we're looking at? And to me, it has reasonable doubts that it will be. I just do not see and that's the reason we wanted the real discussion, which is Congress's fiscal responsibility update. But I don't see any movement in this area. I see it like are frozen. But what are your thoughts on
Yeah,
this? How do you advise people?
Let's take one thing at a time. Let's start with Social Security. I'll tell you what I did and why, and then I'll address your issue of what's likely to happen from here. First, I think when you take Social Security, to a great extent depends upon facts and circumstances relating to the particular individual. In my particular case, I took it as late as possible. And the reason that I took it as late as possible is because I'm fortunate that my family has a long lifespan. Secondly, I didn't need the money. And as you pointed out, the longer that you wait to take it, the more benefit you get. And that benefit is indexed to inflation. And so therefore, from my standpoint, since I didn't need it, since I had a long lifespan in my family, since I'm in good health, I felt that it made sense for me to delay as long as possible. Now, with regard to the financial condition of Social Security, the latest trustees report came out within the last month. It says that the retirement income trust fund is scheduled to run out of money in 9 years. And if Congress doesn't do anything, then there will be a slightly over 20% cut in benefits across the board. Now, we faced this situation before. We faced it in 1983 when we came within weeks of hitting that cliff. And Congress ended up passing legislation that ensured the solvency of the Social Security program for at least 75 years, but they didn't deal with the demographic challenge, which is a major challenge. You know, when I was born, there were 16 people paying in for every person drawing benefits. Now it's less than 3 to 1. So they will reform Social Security. It would be irresponsible. It would be politically suicide for the government to allow people's benefits to be cut 20+% across the board. That's not going to happen. The real question is, when are they going to do something, and what are they going to do? And, you know, and that's one of the things that I talk about in one of the chapters of the book as to what's likely to happen and what do the American people support. And in summary, without getting into the details, which we can talk to later, they support a reformed base defined benefit program with a supplemental defined contribution element. So a hybrid plan, base defined benefit, because defined benefit plans in the private sector are pretty much gone away. And therefore the government would bear the risk for the defined benefit portion. It's indexed to inflation. It's for your entire life. But on the other hand, we got to get the savings rate up. The savings rate is too low. Not everybody is eligible for employer-sponsored plans, and therefore we need to do something to try to get that up and to try to improve the rate of return that people might be able to get through any additional, allocations that they may have to make to help ensure that they have a reasonable standard of living in retirement. So, bottom line, we're not going to let it be cut 20% across the board. The problem is both presidential candidates have said they're not going to touch Social Security and Medicare, which means they're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And the way I try to put it is, if you say you're not going to touch it, that means that you're for a 20% plus across the board cut in 9 years. Is that where you want to be? You want to be for a 20% plus cut in 9 years? The answer to that
sounds good to me, Dad.
Well, but the answer to that politically is no. They don't want to be. They just don't want to be the one to lead. And that's why I'm saying.
I watched something very interesting over the weekend. It was the interview between Donald Trump and Dr. Phil. And then after the interview, Dr. Phil did a fabulous talk with the audience. And there was a section about our financial situation, our inflation situation. And I'd like to play this back for everyone and just get your feedback on it, because I felt like it was a good response. Well, his response, and what his opinion is, because it's something that I have kind of dwelled on, a concern about why we're in such big debt. And he nailed it. I think he nailed it anyway. So here's the very end of the interview with Dr. Phil.
So I was looking at your
Say your name.
Ashley. I was looking at your inflation and how you showed him the piece of paper and the difference when he was in office versus Biden.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I know a lot of people are going to ask me this, is that COVID was during that time. And so that played a part in the inflation. So what can you help me understand? How can we factor in COVID with the inflation numbers and how COVID has impacted that?
Well, you don't want to get me started on that. During COVID, the government printed and distributed $5.5 trillion to people that put $4.4 trillion of it in their savings and checking accounts, which means they didn't need it. When they print that much money, the money you had just went down in value. So if you had $100,000 saved away from working for years and years and years, it just became worth maybe $80,000. That's inflation. So, how does that cut one way or the other? And by the way, that started under Trump, not under Biden. So both of them have ownership in that. So it's very complex. Look, I can't add 2 and 2 and get 5 every time. I can read real fast and remember stuff really well, but I'm not good at math, and I don't tell people what to do with their 401k. I stay in my lane. But I do know that inflation has really gotten out of control. Don't you agree? And I think, I know with the Trump administration, taxes went down and tax revenue went up. Because you lower taxes, you stimulate business and it generates more revenue. And they haven't figured that out yet. I think I would vote for my dog if he did flat tax. I think it would stimulate the economy. It would be more money for everybody. So we'll see. Well, we're out of time. This will all go on.
Did you have anything on?
No, actually, Mar-a-Lago is closed. They closed down for the season.
There you go. I think I would vote for my dog too if he pursued a flat tax, because that would mean that, everyone says, oh, do a wealthy tax. Well, that doesn't do any good, because we all know that they have so many write-offs and deductions that they lower their tax liability. So I think a flat tax would ensure that everyone pays in a tax, that it doesn't go back out. We can realign the IRS personnel with jobs of help processing the undocumented aliens that are in our country and get that under control, rather than, but our money would stay in. But I agree with him. I think that those PPP loans put our country in the biggest debt it's ever been, because nobody had to pay it back. There was no tax liability put on the waiving like they want to do with student loans, or when they charge off a debt on people when they file bankruptcy or just can't pay a debt. So I just think he hit it right on the nail head of where our problem started after COVID. And it was constituted by Trump, a poorly engineered means to help keep the economy going during COVID.
Kim, let me just say, right, you and I are friends, right? And you have brought to my attention issues that face women that I wouldn't have known, right? Sometimes we don't agree. There is almost nobody that I can think of who has ever had a public office that I have more respect for than David M. Walker. Because, hey, he's the former Comptroller General of the United States. And he says things that I it just really gets up my goat, right? Like, I've read his book, right? So when he talks about inheritance tax, like that really upsets me. And I have on the show gone off at him about it. I don't hate the guy. I just strongly disagree. Am I right? Am I wrong? No.
What?
Yes, maybe. But David M. Walker has never said to me, hey, you don't agree with my position on death taxes, or as he likes to say, birth burden, right? You don't agree with that? Well, I hate you. You're a horrible person, Shaquille. I never want to talk to you again. He doesn't do that. What we have allowed to happen is we have allowed the politicians to get in there and manipulate us and to put us against each other.
Not
Milton
manipulated me, but
Sure. I would never manipulate you, my dear. In Milton Friedman, who is, I say he's my favorite economist, and people say, oh, why? Because you're such a libertarian. No, just because, hey, I was born in 1983 and like there's YouTube videos on him and like, you know, like he's accessible to me. What am I going to do? Read Adam Smith or Karl Marx? Like, they're not accessible to me. I can actually see and hear what Milton Friedman said, right? So I like a lot of the things that he said. But when people say to me, oh, you should deregulate, and then other people who are generally on the left say, well, if you deregulate, what about this? What about if major corporations manipulate the food market? What if major corporations get together and lobby government in such a way that you can't get ahead? But here's the thing. For right now, from an American perspective, which I can't really give because I'm not American, but just from an international perspective looking at the United States, Milton Friedman complained bitterly that the US Fed was responsible for the depravity that occurred during the Great Depression. Now, for everything that I know, and I don't know whether David M. Walker would agree with me on this, but from everything that I have studied, I agree with him, actually. I think the Fed acted very, very poorly. In fact, they actually said at one point, we will act, but we'll only act when there's a real crisis. Look, I wasn't alive in 1929, but it seems like it's a pretty big crisis. Seems like it's pretty bad, right? What happened during the Great Recession? Let's come forward. What happened during the Great Recession? If you ask an American what happened during the Great Recession, they're going to tell you how horrible it was, how much suffering that there was. You ask an Australian what the Great Recession was like, bring it on, baby. It was a party. The Australian dollar went to $1.20 against the US. We could buy property. It was fantastic. We could travel to your country. It was amazing. What recession? What are you talking about? We had a boom during those times. Is that also the fault of the Fed? Maybe, maybe not. Is it also the fault of government? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But when we look at COVID, sorry, Dave, I'll finish. Just give me 1 second. When we look at COVID, I pull back on criticizing left-wing politicians for being too overbearing or right-wing politicians for not advocating enough for health benefits or whatever it is that they were advocating, that they should have been advocating for. Because if you look at the United States, which is the country that you guys are mostly focusing on, let's really look at it. Yes, you guys increased dramatically the amount of debt you had. You increased dramatically the amount of deficit spending. Is that good or is that bad? I don't know. But I'll tell you this. The predominant complaint, if you break it right down, the predominant complaint in the United States from the right is not actually that government increased spending. It's that they increased spending on social issues that they don't agree with. The predominant issue on the left is that they've increased spending and subsidies, etc., for big business. The reality is we don't know what the correct response is. But before we go around criticizing government for our leaders, and it's be the only time I promise you, I cross my heart and hope to die, I promise you I will never defend government again. The predominant issue is what exactly is it that we're expecting government to do?
Let's talk about that. First, let me give you my reaction to Dr. Phil, okay? And then we can talk on some
I was
related.
hoping you'd react to me, Dave. Come on now. I'm much better looking. Just because you look like Dr. Phil, I'm much better looking and more eccentric and charming, surely.
I enjoyed everything you had to say, Shaquille. All right. So here's the issue. We had a problem before COVID, but COVID exacerbated our problem. During COVID, we had a lot of things come together that helped to fuel inflation to record levels in June of 2021 of 9.1%. We had excessive spending without adequate controls and accountability, huge fraud, waste, abuse associated with it. We had loose monetary policy. The Federal Reserve kept interest rates too low for too long. Okay. They also purchased most of the new debt that was issued as a result of the excessive spending in order to try to hold down short-term interest rates. They waited too long to correct. Okay. The first major spending package associated with COVID, we needed to do something. We can debate whether we did the right amount in the right way, but the second one that came during the current administration should not have come at all. We didn't need it, okay? The issue here is not just the Congress, but it's also the Fed. The Fed has three objectives that it's been given. Number one, to try to control inflation. Number two, to try to promote economic growth. And number three, to try to help if we have an unemployment problem. The fact is their number one priority needs to be inflation. They should have pro-growth policies, but frankly, it's not the job of the Fed to deal with unemployment. That deals with tax policy, regulatory policy. It deals with education policy. It deals with the Fed has nothing to do with that. And by the way, we don't have a major unemployment problem and haven't for a while. We did during part of the time of COVID because we shut down a lot of businesses, but that shot right back up. Actually, unemployment was less pre-COVID than it is now. Unemployment got down to 3.5% pre-COVID. Now it's 4%, if you will. That's still not high, but the biggest problem we have a mismatch between what we need and what we have as it relates to skills and knowledge, and we're not solving that through having an open border on the southern part of the country. Couple other things real quick, and then we'll open it up. Flat tax. Intellectually, I'm fine with a flat tax, but the question is, how do you define taxable income? Just because you have a flat tax doesn't mean the system's going to work better. I mean, how much income are you going to exempt from taxation? What are you going to consider to be taxable income? Now we've got one of the presidential candidates saying he doesn't want to tax tips, which I think is absurd. Okay.
That's wrong.
I think it's wrong. Okay. I mean, we ought to be moving towards where the Europeans are, and that is people that are in the business where they rely primarily on tips. We ought to pay them enough money so they don't have to rely on tips.
Exactly.
Because right now, it's estimated about 45% of tip income never gets claimed, never gets reported to the IRS as income, which means that not only do you not pay income taxes on it, you don't pay social insurance taxes on it either. Okay.
And you're turning everybody into a tax cheat.
Right, exactly. And so, it's wrong-headed. It's a political move. All right. It ain't going to help our deficit situation. And it'll create a perverse incentive. It'll create, a perverse incentive. So the bottom line is that there's a lot going on right now. I don't know where you want to take it, Nick, but you also have to keep in mind there were supply chain problems, and so you pumped a lot of money out, right? So you have a lot of money, and yet you have constrained supply. That means you end up going to have more inflation. You also have to keep in mind that for the first 2 years of this administration, You had one party controlling the Senate, the House, and the White House, and they were believers in the modern monetary theory that said deficits and debt don't matter as long as you can borrow in your own reserve currency until you have excess inflation. Well, guess what? It caused excess inflation. And now, we still aren't treating our disease, which is a fiscal cancer, and we don't have leaders that are willing to address large, known, and growing problems, including where we started, Social Security. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, my question deals with an update on Congress addressing the fiscal responsibility issue. In Europe, which I will be going over to in the next couple months to reside, Spain, of course, will be the place I'm going to live. But Spain and Greece and Italy all had problems with their debt to GDP ratio, which the European Union reined every one of them in to be part of it. In other words, they didn't allow their debt to GDP ratio just to go spiraling out of control, where all three countries were heading in that direction. The United States of America apparently doesn't have any controls in terms of their fiscal responsibility. The last I checked, the debt was around 35 trillion. The next country that had a huge debt was the United Kingdom, around 10 trillion. Then Japan, around 10 trillion. But there's no checks. So my question to you, David, is what is Congress doing right now as we speak in terms of balancing the budget, getting fiscal responsibility ingrained in their system, as opposed to the wild split spending that they've been doing for the last decade or so?
The answer is little to nothing. And let me tell you the two things that I have testified on, and I will testify on again, probably in July, that we need, in addition to presidential leadership, which we haven't had since Bill Clinton on this issue. We need a statutory fiscal sustainability commission that will engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, listen to what they have to say, make a package of recommendations where everything's on the table, but not everything is equal, including social insurance programs, including taxes, including defense spending, and for a guaranteed up or down vote in Congress. It is absolutely essential. And the speaker was for it. Now he's not. And the reason he's not, allegedly, is because Grover Norquist and the Americans for Tax Reform strongly oppose it because you're putting revenues on the table. In addition to that, AARP opposes it because they don't believe that Social Security should be handled as part of a larger, fiscal commission. And so those are two groups that have a tremendous amount of lobbying power, and that's caused the speaker to back off. He needs to change course. He needs to add it to the continuing resolution, which undoubtedly we're going to end up having, given this is an election year and they haven't passed all the appropriations bills, since 1997, before the beginning of the fiscal year. The second thing that we need is we need a constitutional amendment that will limit how much debt as a percentage of the economy that we can take on. You talk about Spain and these other countries. Well, they're a member of the Eurozone. So it's not the European Union. It's the countries that are part of the Eurozone that are subject to the European Central Bank. And they have targets for deficits and they have targets for debt to GDP. And that's what ended up happening. I mean, Germany in particular put pressure on them to get their act together. And that obviously worked. We don't have anything like that. And that's why you need a constitutional amendment, because that's the only thing that will bind current and future Congresses. And in that regard, we now have several states that later this year are likely to sue the Congress for failing to call a convention of states to propose a fiscal responsibility amendment when, as far back as 1979, we had enough states calling for that. 79 and for about 20 years thereafter, and yet Congress did nothing. We crossed the goal line. It's time to put the points on the board. It's time to let the states take control of the issue because Congress is out of touch and out of control.
And the people of those states should demand that Congress does that. I'm going to talk about the European Union for a minute. And we'll talk specifically about the euro. The euro will, no doubt, there's no question in my mind, the euro will fail. And it should. What the ECB and the European Union, not Europe itself, I love Europe, but what the ECB has done is an absolute disgrace. And the misery that they have imposed on the poorest countries within the Eurozone, every single member of the European Union Parliament and the European Commission should hang their heads in shame for what they've done to the European Union. I want to now come to the United States. Yes, you've got some fiscal issues. Yes, you've got some problems. And Dave, the greatest respect, and I hope that you actually know that I really mean that. I'm not just saying that to be a sycophant. But what the United States is doing is it is telling people on the fiscally responsible side of your politics that we're going to make all of these really great decisions to help, and I don't want to make this a generational thing, but to help the generation that came before, the people that are growing up right now. What the young people of today are faced with in the United States and around the Western world is a world that they can't participate in. If you're a conservative, you look at them, they go, oh, you did some gender studies stuff, you're an idiot, ha, 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 ha. And that kid's got $200,000 in debt. Okay, let's just count them. Let's say they're all just crazy people. Now let's look at those kids that went through conservative university subjects or went and got a trade, which is the conservative talking point. How much debt have they got? Can that guy that didn't go to university but did an apprenticeship and became an electrician or a plumber, is that guy able to survive? No. Can they go buy a house? No. The world has become so unfair to young people. And maybe, just maybe, the solution is not to fix the government programs to make the government programs better, but maybe the solution is to say to young people, look, we're sorry. Us boomers, not me, you, us boomers really screwed up. We'd really like for you to work really hard to help us to live through our retirements, and we'll do it because we love you. But please don't institute laws and rules and so-called changes that are going to make us do that to our children. You guys screwed up enough. It's going to be our turn soon. We'll look after you, but don't sit there and tell us that we're not going to retire until we're 75. We're not going to retire until we're 80. We've got to contribute just a little more. Okay? Your generation had, not you, I'm not directing this specifically at you. Boomers had a dream run through life. They sit there and they say to people like me, oh, well, I came home and my dad used to belt me over the thing. And okay, cool. Yeah, you had it tough. So did we. Every generation has that. But don't try to fix whatever hurt you have by making us pay for it, not just today, because we'll do it because we love you, because you're our parents and our grandparents, but you're going to make us live through the same pain that you've gone through in 50 years from now. It's not right.
Here's a couple of thoughts. When you look at the U.S. government, and there are other governments that have similar challenges, it's grown too big, promised too much, subsidized too many, lost control of the budget. I agree with you that the baby boom generation, of which I am a member, it may be the first generation in the history of this country that's going to end up leaving the country worse off than at the beginning of the generation. And I think that's unacceptable. That's one of the reasons that I fight. You have a lot of young people who are focused on environmental sustainability. And you don't have enough young people focused on fiscal sustainability. Let me build you a bridge. Climate change is real. Man has something to do with it, meaning humankind, men, women, etc. Human has something to do with it. But the truth is that air, water, and other resources do not respect geopolitical boundaries. Yes, the United States can provide leadership in this area, but if China, India, and other major countries do not participate, we cannot solve the problem. On the other hand, our fiscal problem is our problem. We can solve it in an equitable and sustainable way, sooner rather than later, I hope. But if we don't solve it, there will be serious adverse effects globally, not just in the United States, globally. And so I think when we talk about sustainability and when we talk about equity, then we need to recognize that there's more than one thing involved here, including the fiscal. Last thing is, I say what's going on right now is that we are mortgaging the future of young people.
Yes.
At a time that we're reducing investments in their future, at a time where they're going to face a lot tougher competition in an increasingly interconnected and independent world. That is irresponsible, it is inequitable, it is immoral, and it needs to stop.
So I don't know how you get.
Sorry, Rick. You guys can say that, and I truly believe that you say that with some conviction. Government's a problem. Government has promised us all these things. You know what? They didn't promise it to me. Again, it's not personal. I'm not directly putting it at you.
Yeah.
But they didn't promise it to me. I'm 40. They didn't promise it to me. They didn't promise it. I don't have children, but if I did, they didn't promise it to my children. They promised it to you. They promised it to your generation.
Well, Shaquille,
and people get older.
Shaquille,
people get older, and all of a sudden they say, well, we better be fiscally responsible. We better make sure that international countries like China and this and that act more responsibly. So what we're going to do is we're going to put tariffs on, or we're going to increase taxes, or we're going to do this or that or the other. Meanwhile, let's just be really honest about this. Okay? The suicide rate of youth in all Western countries, in every single Western country, is higher today than it has ever been. It is higher today than what it was in your generation, and your generation went through World War II. The generation before you went through World War I. The depravity, the human suffering that occurred during your generation, I can't even imagine it. But the young kids of today kill themselves at rates that are like 40 times higher than what your generation did. Okay? Young people today have the lowest levels of marriage, have the lowest levels of birth rates. Young people today are graduating, and ignore COVID, even before COVID, are graduating out of high school with lower rates of competency in maths, in English, in every major subject. And so these young people are walking around saying, what the hell? What is going on? What can we do? Now, I'm going to advocate that maybe what we should do is let them have a bit more control, let retirement plans not be a government thing, let them have more control. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll accept that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe government should do something more for them. I don't know. But the bottom line is that we have today a situation that was warned about. It's not as though 20 years ago there were some high school kids that were warning about what the problem is going to be in 20 years from now. And those high school kids are now grown up and they're my age and they're 40, right? And are going, oh, well, yeah, we should have listened. That's not the case. Your generation, I'm not directing this at you personally, right? Because I really respect you. Your generation has had decades of economists. I'm 40. When I study economists, who do I study? I study the economists of your generation. I study things that you guys said. And you guys have created a world for the rest of us to inherit that we can't possibly live in, that we can't buy a house. I can because I'm loaded, but not me. But every other person in my generation, they can't buy a house. They can't go through university. When we listen to you guys, you go, oh, well, yeah, I had a job as a waiter and I earned $35 a week and I paid my way through university and I did all the hard work. Yeah, really? Really? Try doing that today. So all I'm saying is, if we're going to make changes, maybe there should be some diversity of age groups. And that diversity of age groups is not a left-right wing thing. Maybe your generation needs to take responsibility like you tell us to do and say, we screwed this up and here's how we're going to fix it. And we're going to fix it not by making you pay for it.
Hold on. So how do you make that happen? Because boomers demographically own the vote. There's a ton of us. We show up at the polls. We have all the money so we can pay for all the political campaigns and buy all the politicians. And I don't see a lot of messaging telling boomers to back off. So how do you make any of that happen?
Well, maybe there should be some of that, Rick. Maybe there should be some of that.
Yeah, but should and will. How do you make that happen?
During the 60s, you guys go and get these VW vans and put flowers on them and tell everybody, oh, we're, peace and love and free sex and do lots of drugs. And you tell us, don't do drugs, kids. That's really bad. You know what you should do? Go to university, get a degree, behave yourself, and you too could be happy.
But, okay,
really? We're supposed to think we're going to be happy like you guys that have a 60% divorce rate? Is that what we're supposed to do?
Hold on. First, my father's generation was World War II, not me.
I do apologize, Dave. I'm sorry.
No. That was the greatest generation. That was our country. That was the greatest generation. Okay. Rick and I are the Vietnam era, if you will. Okay. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And that's one of the reasons that I'm fighting. I'm not worried about me. I'm not really worried about my kids. I'm very concerned about my grandkids. I'm very concerned about the future of this country, my grandkids and future generations. I'm trying to fight. We need more people to fight. I tell the truth, as I said, you've bought the book, you've read the book. So I'm trying to play a constructive role. All right. That recognizing intergenerational equities. And the answer is not just to load all these burdens off on young people when in fact, they're going to have a lot tougher time for a lot of reasons. Okay. But let me just mention one thing. It's true that Social Security and Medicare are geared towards seniors. All right. But there's a lot of other government programs that are deemed to be mandatory spending that have nothing to do with seniors. Okay. Including Medicaid, which is for the poor and the disabled and things of that nature. So, we've got a problem, not just with regard to the programs that relate to seniors, but we've got a problem with regard to many other programs too. But go, Rick.
Sorry, Rick.
Let me say something really quick. Our parents and grandparents' generation had a very clear and obviously evil enemy in the Germans and, the Japanese that were marching through the world spreading fascism. How do we, which, gave it an urgency. How do you make this stuff clear and urgent?
I just want to quickly say something, and it's not just to you, Dave, personally, but just to our audience, right? As I said, I'm not trying to be sycophantic. I respect you immensely, and I don't want you to feel as though the things that I've said are directed at you,
Oh,
right? And also, I don't want you to feel as though they're directed at your generation. Although, sometimes I'll be comedic or sometimes when I'm angry, I will lash out at you. But hey, every teenage rebel does. I'm 20 years away from being a teenager, but
you
the child of me,
general, you can handle it. I can.
the child of me will still rebel. But look, when I talk to my mother, and my mother's got a reasonable amount of money, right? She has a reasonable amount of assets. But even if she didn't, I want to look after her, and I want to look after other people, right? I have a woman that actually looks after me who's watching right now. She used to look after me when I was a child. And I was at her house a year ago, and I was looking at her finances. I was like, how do you afford to pay for this or that? And she sort of hung her head and she looked down at the ground and she said, I rely on the local charity to give me food. That's not okay with me. It's not. It's not okay with me. And what I'm trying to say to the older generation, which is currently in power, I don't hate you as much as I am anti-government and this and that. I'm not trying to, attack you guys. But if what you've done hasn't worked for you guys, don't try to impose it on us. We'll look after you. We love you. Okay? But don't try to impose it on us. When you sit there and you say, oh, my child or my grandchild is going through this stuff and I feel so bad for them, yeah, that's great, but we don't need your pity or your sympathy. Right? We don't need that. Just when you tell us not to be know-it-alls, when you tell us, oh, you're so young, you don't know everything, okay, fair enough, we'll take it. Maybe we're young and naive. But what makes you guys think that because of age, you have such great wisdom when what you have created in the Western world, we can talk about these other countries and how much they've screwed up. But look at ours. Look at ours. Look at the United States. Here we've got, according to you guys, not me, because I'm an American, according to you guys, the freest country on earth, the greatest country on earth. Really? Really? Where are your kids graduating out of high school? Oh, yeah, amongst the lowest of the OECD nations. Really? And you're going to get there. This is not a creation. The education system is not a creation of ours. It's a creation of yours.
But Shaquille,
So when you sit there and try and tell us that you've got this great wisdom, please give us a break.
Shaquille, as you should know from the book, one of the things that I talk about is you have to measure outcomes based on where you are, what the trend is, and how you compare to others. And when you do that, you find out that the United States, while is leading in many things, is way below average in a number of things. For example, K through 12 education results, healthcare outcomes. I could go on, right? And so I agree with that. But understand, we are a republic, okay? We are a representative democracy. And in order for things to change, in addition to having leaders who will lead the change, and most importantly being the president of the United States, whomever that is, young people have to become much more informed and involved than they have been historically. There's an opportunity for them to make a bigger difference because if you look at, the baby boom generation is starting to die off, right? And there's a generation younger than us that is larger than the baby boom generation now. And it will obviously continue to be because the baby boom generation is dying off. They have to be much more informed and involved, with regard to voting and activism if they want things to change. We'll see. We'll see whether they do. That's what it's going to
David, let me ask you a question, David. And I'm only going to ask you for a yes or no answer.
Okay.
With no explanation, just a yes or no answer. You're the former Comptroller General of the United States. Okay. of all the countries in the world that the US and the West and the Five Eyes nations can give advice to, we can go around the world, we can talk to developing countries, we can tell them what to do. But let's just talk about one of your closest allies, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Canada, or Australia. The other 4 members of the United States, of the Five Eyes. Based on current or prior US economic policy, if you were employed as a consultant and was asked by any of the other 4 members of the Five Eyes nations, would you recommend that they adopt US economic policy?
Depends on how you define economic policy.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Would you recommend that they follow US footsteps?
Not current economic policy. No. The answer is no.
Well,
And
you know, part of
New Zealand probably has its act together better than the others.
Sorry, who does? Sorry.
New Zealand
Who did you say that?
have its act together better with regard to trying.
Did you say England?
No,
New Zealand.
New Zealand. Well, yeah, well, yeah.
Kiwis. They're also
New
the
Zealand.
they're also the smallest of the ones you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're also, because my family live in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
They have the highest level of youth suicide in the Western world. They have the highest rate of family disruption in the Western world. Of all the Five Eyes countries, if you independently look at the rates in New Zealand, okay, New Zealand is doing terribly. I was in New Zealand just after COVID, just before my grandmother passed away. I went to New Zealand. It was the first time I was able to travel over there after I had 3 vaccines because I had to have it to go over there. Do you know how much a carton of eggs cost? $30.
that's the
$30.
US in the future.
That's
Do you know, Dave, I know your daughter is married. If I was to get together with your daughter, right, and I said to her, hey, who cares? Let's just sit back and relax in a house. Do you know how much I would receive if her and I had 2 kids and I lived in New Zealand? Do you know how much we'd get? About $1,400 a week.
Whoa.
Why would I go
What?
and work? Not American dollars, but New Zealand.
Yeah.
Why would I go and work? And that's the problem. See, when international economists look at other countries, they look at them and they go, okay, look, this seems really good, or this seems really humane. But it's not. It's really not. When you look at all those countries that do the things that you think naturally sound really good, the people that live there are suffering. And again, not to belabor the point, but it's your generation that did this. It's not mine. And it's certainly not the generation of the children that I don't have.
But the thing is, the problems we're discussing are solvable, but you can't solve a problem unless you identify the problem. And the one problem that I see is that our media and our government isn't even identifying the fiscal problem, David. In other words, it's almost like we're going to put climate change up in front. And I agree with you. We don't have total control over climate change. Are we going to put fiscal responsibility up in front? Which
Yeah,
we
but
have
money-
control of.
But
And
money's easy. Money's
They're
easy.
not addressing this in the media. They're not addressing it in your schools. They're not addressing it in the education system. And apparently you're having in the United States a total failure when it comes to fiscal responsibility. That's in the government. Now, in terms of individuals, which I work with, they're doing better financially. Most of the people I associate with and work with are making more, have more, and continually make more and have more. They're not running into, my circle isn't running into fiscal problems. They're doing very well. The real problem is the average American is really taking on the chin, especially when you look at the rents. That inflation really hit 2 areas really hard: rents and food,
Yeah.
which
Nick,
What poor people are
Nick,
choosing.
what you've just said is so easy to manipulate, right? Rick Rosner's there. Says hand up for ages during this show, and he should have the opportunity to speak. But let me ask you, Rick, just one second. Let me just ask you this, Nick, because you're one of the founders of Pod, right? Let's say, for example, that I don't like Rick, right? And I say to you, I don't ever want to see Rick on Pod TV again. I never want to see him there. I don't want him to have any say whatsoever. What are you going to say to me? No, Shaquille, you're an idiot. No, Rick has absolutely every right to come on and express his view. So then I say to you, oh, well, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. What if I give you $100,000? I'm going to give you $100,000 on the condition that Rick Rosner never comes on this network again. Are you going to say yes or no? Well, you've got a little bit of money because you own some pension funds and stuff like that. Okay, so I'll up the ante. All right, fair enough. Because I really don't like Rick. It's not true, Rick. I love you, buddy. But I really don't like Rick. How about $1 million? Is that enough? What about 10 million? If I give you right now, if I write you out a check right now for $10 million on the condition that Rick never appears again on Pod TV, will you take the money, or are you going to let him have freedom of speech? Oh, good, you'd let him. Just for the record, I didn't say I was going to give you 10 million. It was a hypothetical. Dave, you're a lawyer, right? Save me here.
No, I'm not. Wait. Why don't you pay me the money?
I got to get a bid from Rick. Going the other way.
Go, Rick.
Yeah.
Do you know how much it cost me to get rid of you?
I'm cheaper than Nick. You can get rid of me for much less. So
I can get rid of myself for that.
Nick, sweetheart, I've seen Naked at Midnight. I know how cheap you are, baby.
All right. So I'm looking at a survey from April of the most important issue for voters, and federal budget deficit, federal debt is the 14th most important issue.
Yeah, but here's part of the problem, Rick. One of the top issues has to be inflation and the economy, right? And what they don't understand, this is part of where education comes in. They have to understand that they relate to each other, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so you're right. If you just pick up that issue by itself, without them understanding that one drives the other problem, then yes. But I think that's why public education engagement is so important.
But why aren't you on MSNBC and Fox and CNN saying this stuff?
You mean MSD?
Rick, are you serious? Are you serious? You used to work for Kimmel. Are you serious? Do you think that any of the mass media is going to get somebody as logical and sensible as Dave Walker on their networks? David M. Walker knows what he's talking about. David, let me tell you, I know you've had this run for, the third party and all that sort of stuff. My friend, you've got no shot at all because you're sensible. You actually have a brain. What's wrong with you? If you could please try to act less sensible, you've got more of a chance.
Well, wait. The deal is that producers run out of ideas. If you send them an email saying, "I've got an idea for a segment on your show,"
I used to be on television a lot. Okay, I'm on it less frequently now. Okay, for lots of different reasons, because generally they want people from the left and the right, and I'm in the sensible center. They generally want people to fight, not to solve problems. Okay, but I know we're probably at the time now.
We're at the time.
No. I'm going to say this to you, Dave. We agreed a few years ago, right? And I can raise $1 billion